Hi there. Thank you so much for joining me on today's presentation. I prepared some slides for you, so I'm going to share my screen. My name is Rachel Oliver, and during this brief presentation, I will share with you my strategy for code proofing cash flow and generating above average profits. And I will show you how a $400,000 property generates over $800 a month in cash flow in one of the hottest markets in Ontario. No renovations, no tenants, no toilets. Now, before I share with you what I do and how I do it, I want to share with you the 5 R's that I don't do. And the first one is renters. Now, this is a perfect example of why. There was an article about a gentleman, he's an Ontario landlord, who rented out his rental property, and this was his first venture into being a landlord. He rented it out to people he met through his church. And these renters, as you can imagine, turned out to be scammers. So not only did they do a midnight move and leave him with $12,000 to $15,000 in damages, they also owed him about $500 in utilities. And the sad part is that he couldn't even go to the landlord board and have any recourse, because once those tenants move out, then it becomes a small claims court issue, and good luck finding those tenants. So no runaway tenants or renters for me. The other R that I stay away from is renovations. I like to get into move-in ready properties and have to avoid contractors and tools. In fact, I have no idea what that round, sharp power tool is and what you do with it. So no renovations for me. The other thing that I like to stay away from is roofing repairs. And where there's a roofing repair, eventually there's going to be a roof replacement. And that can be anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000. No, thank you. No roofing repairs, no roof replacements for me. And you guessed it. Reaching deep inside of a toilet to unclog it, whether I do it myself or I hire a professional plumber to do it, not for me. So that's out. And last but not least, rationing pennies each month and feeling uncertain whether this month I'm going to be in the red. And especially during COVID and all the confusion that COVID created, you know, a lot of people were feeling that distress, and, you know, rationing pennies is just not for me. So that's the 5th R. And in reality, all of these 5 R's that I have an aversion to got me to say hello to RTO. And RTO stands for the rent to own investment strategy. And what that really means is hello cash flow. And it was all of my resistance to some of these other investing strategies that actually opened my eyes to what I really wanted. And I discovered in that assessment is that I want cash flow without compromise. And what do I mean by that? I want cash flow that's predictable and that offers me peace of mind, meaning that I don't want to have those midnight renter runaways or worry that people are going to damage the property that I worked so hard to purchase and ultimately create rental income through. Now, I also want free time. I really value my time. Listen, one thing we all have in common, no matter where you live, no matter what walk of life you're from, is that we share 24 hours a day. That's it. So how do you spend your time? I know everyone is always super busy and everyone is always scrambling to find more time. So for me, cash flow without compromise means finding free time for my family and finding free time for fun, because that's what really life is about, and I want more of that. And for me, it's really important to also invest with a purpose. I like knowing that any money that I put into any investment vehicle, that it actually has some sort of impact, a positive impact. So for me, cash flow without compromise represents these 3 things. And I'm sure for you, there might be some similarities, but think to yourself, what does cash flow without compromise mean for you? It's a great place to start to figure out what kind of real estate investing strategy is going to make sense for you. Now, I have been very dedicated to the rent-own strategy. I have, in fact, done almost 400 deals, have helped about 360 families so far overcome some of their barriers to getting into home ownership, because that's really at the heart of it. The rent to own strategy is really about helping people overcome a challenge. You're solving a problem for them. So it's not just about the property. Now, having said that, we still do deals in some of the hottest markets. We work in the top 10 Ontario investment towns, and I'm sure a lot of these names are familiar: Ottawa, Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, Hamilton, Barrie, Brampton, Durham region. That's a big area. Toronto, Kingston, Orillia, Grimsby, St. Catharines. I mean, these are just some of the markets that we focus on, and then the peripheral markets within them. The reason we love these markets is because, first of all, we're dealing with entry-level price points, anywhere from $350,000 to $550,000. So that means my investment dollars go a little bit further, and I can do, the average investment anywhere from $75,000 to about $95,000, and I don't have to worry about renovations and after repair value. So it's kind of like a set it and forget it strategy, the way I do it, but not everybody operates that way. Now, also what I have done in the past is I got so focused on the rent to own strategy that the phone started ringing, and a lot of home buyers were contacting my husband and I, because we were doing this together as a team. And we figured out that there's a lot of misinformation and miseducation about how rent to owns work. What do they do and what don't they do? So we realized that, after about helping 50 families, we thought that we have a wealth of knowledge to share. And we wrote the first Canadian resource for home buyers on how the rent to own process works. Now, our book is not just for home buyers. If you're an investor, this is an excellent resource for you if you want to understand the nitty-gritty and the details. Specifically, what is the difference between property first and people first? Who is the ideal tenant? What are the calculations that go into putting a fair deal together? What do the contracts look like, and what are the key clauses? And ultimately, what are the pitfalls? And of course, there's probably so much more. It's available as a paperback on Amazon.ca, or you can grab it as an ebook. But if this is something that interests you and you're trying to do a little bit more research, I'm very proud of this resource, and you can grab a copy at your convenience. Now, I'm going to take you back to 2009. Ugh, I was a brunette back then. And in this photograph, our daughter was about 3 years old when we first started doing rent to owns. And that's when I kind of got a real sense of where my priorities are. We had our first daughter, and of course, my husband and I, Mr. No, I call him Mr. No because he always sees the glass as being half empty. But he is my partner in life and in business, and over the years together, we have created, we have designed our life. And at that time, I had a vision. I really wanted to spend more time with my family, and I wanted to do it through real estate. I knew that real estate was a terrific vehicle. So I set a goal. I wanted to leave my job, and I knew that I needed strong cash flow to offset that regular, predictable, consistent paycheck. And of course, my husband was completely in awe because we had no previous background, no previous experience with real estate or investing in any way, nor did we have any money saved up. We were just kind of like flying by the seat of our pants, or so he thought. But he didn't realize that I was doing a lot of research in the background. And one of the things that I came across was kind of wealth building objectives versus cash flow now. And what we discovered is that when most people think about getting involved with real estate investing, they think about buying a rental property. I was exactly the same way. So I started looking at rental properties. And what I realized is that with rental properties, cash flow increases over time because rental income goes up as the mortgage gets paid down. So in the very beginning, you have very little cash flow. And then, of course, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But you have to sometimes wait 5 to 10 years in order for it to be lucrative. But up until that point, anywhere from $180 to $200 a month is kind of normal. And that's what we were seeing when we were going out with our real estate agents shopping for rental properties. And then we discovered that there's the other way. You can also focus your attention on the cash flow now strategy, which is really what I was gravitating to because I wanted to replace a job income. Plus, I didn't want to deal with pesky tenants and toilets, I wanted to free up my time. Sounded like a win-win. And the average cash flow range was anywhere from $600 a month to $900 a month using the rent to own strategy. So of course that piqued my interest and I did a little bit more research. And this is where I want to address the elephant in the room. So I discovered that rent to owns actually had a pretty shady reputation. Most people told me that rent to owns have about a 50-50 chance of actually working out. And, granted, the investor still profits if a rent to own goes a little bit sideways, but there'd be a lot of hassles and a lot of uncertainty. And I'm not into that kind of thing. Remember, I just want things clean, simple, predictable, no hassles, no headaches, no toilets, no tenants. So I really wanted to figure out what was wrong with the way rent to owns were being done. And my husband is a numbers guy. So we dissected rent to own deal after rent to own deal after rent to own deal. And we finally realized there was probably 3 or 4 areas where other people were missing the mark. So what we decided to do was re-engineer how rent to owns were being done. And our goal was to increase the success rate. We wanted it to go from 50% success rate to 90% success rate or better. And that involved us essentially learning this model and using ourselves as guinea pigs. And ultimately, we grabbed some money out of our personal residence property and we refinanced it. We had a line of credit against the property and we got busy. Now, a lot has changed in the last decade that we have been focusing on this, and specifically the real estate market has become a little bit more pricey and mortgage rules have changed significantly for us as investors. When I got started, we could buy with 0 down and perfect credit. I mean, those were the days. However, over the years, by focusing on the strategy and specializing on it, what we've been able to do was preserve the consistency and continuity of our cash flow and profits. So with, fast forward nearly over a decade later, we're still seeing the $600 to $900 a month cash flow just because we pivoted and tweaked and perfected a few things. So I decided I'm going to share with you guys a recent deal in St. Thomas. Now, St. Thomas is considered to be a very hot market. It's just outside of London. And London, believe it or not, has become so competitive and in some cases so overpriced that it makes more sense to drive just 15, 20 minutes further out to St. Thomas, which attracts a lot of first-time home buyers. There's a lot of new development. Price points are very affordable and the quality of housing is outstanding. So I wanted to share a story with you guys about a gentleman named Nunzio who wanted to create some cash flow for himself and his wife. His wife was in the travel business, and when COVID hit, of course, the travel industry shut down. So she was temporarily laid off, and they had already set up a HELOC, so a home equity line of credit against their personal residence. So they had some liquid cash sitting around, and they kind of hummed and hawed and thought, okay, well, do we keep this cash in our bank account for a rainy day? Or do we put it into action and somehow make it create more cash flow for us? And that's exactly what Nunzio and his wife did. They wanted to offset the income loss from her travel job and use 2 rent-to-own deals in order to create some cash flow. So walk you through one of the deals that they did during COVID. It's in St. Thomas, and I'm going to share with you how the numbers come together on a typical deal. So we're going to talk about what the investment amount is, what the cash flow looks like, what the capital gain is, and ultimately what the total profit comes to. All right, so now remember, this is a 36-month deal. Most rent-to-owns are either 36 months or 48 months, which means that you basically just have consistent, continuous cash flow for the 36 months of the deal. Okay, so in this case, let's talk about the investment. So how much money did Nunzio have to put into this deal? It all starts with the purchase price of the property. And in this case, the purchase price of the property was $367,500. You're thinking, whoa, are those prices even available? Absolutely. The tenant buyer, so the family that needs help renting to own this property, has a down payment. Now, remember, in a rent to own, we're not dealing with first and last month's rent. We're dealing with people who have home buyer mentality. So they've been saving. It's just not enough for them to walk into a bank and qualify for a mortgage. So they need a little bit of help. So they'll take their $20,000 and they'll give it to the investor as their initial down payment. And in that case, that offsets how much capital the investor has to tie up in a investment property. So in this case, the total cash that Nunzio would have in the deal is about $72,200. It includes all of the closing costs. That would include 20% down payment to his lender because he's getting a mortgage, and basically all of the acquisition costs, less the $20,000 that the tenant buyer gave him. Now let's talk about the cash flow. This is my favorite part. So the tenant buyer in this case is on contract to pay Nunzio every month $2,117. Now remember, their $20,000 is not enough for them to get a mortgage, because the whole point of why somebody wants to rent to own is to buy a little bit of time to fix some credit challenges, to build up a bigger down payment. So in this case, they gave Nunzio an initial $20,000, and every month they're adding to that down payment. So they're buying the property basically in increments of $445 every month for 36 months. Now, there's of course going to be some expenses, there's carrying costs on the property. So when you take into account mortgage, taxes, insurance, it all adds up to about $1,741. So when you deduct the expenses, Nunzio is left with about $821 in monthly cash flow. And annually, that injects about $9,852 into his bank account. Now, this is a really important consideration. Borrowing costs really factor into how much monthly cash flow you can generate with a typical rent-to-own deal. Now, in this case, I'm using a fairly conservative interest rate, which was 3.24 and 30-year amortization with an 80% mortgage. Very conservative. It depends where you are, but if your interest rate goes down, your cash flow goes up a little bit, and I'll chat with you about that shortly. So now let's take a look at the capital gain. So fast forward to 2023, and Nunzio is now selling this property to these home buyers for an appreciated purchase price. So remember, he bought it for $387. Now he's selling it for $421,791. And this was locked in at the beginning, so everybody knows exactly what's happening. There's no surprises. There's going to be some mortgage pay down. So the mortgage balance owing on this property is going to be about $275,661 at the very end. Then of course, Nunzio has to pay himself back. He can pull out his initial investment of $72,200 at the very end of the deal, puts that money back in his pocket. And remember, the tenant buyer has been accumulating a down payment. Now, that money has been given physically to Nunzio, and Nunzio can do what he wants with that money because that down payment credit is mostly not refundable. And the tenant buyer gets just a credit on paper off of the purchase price because Nunzio has received $36,000 of their money. And this is where he credits it. So once he credits it, then we have to calculate the capital gain. But before we can do that, we have to take into account that there's going to be some disposition costs at the end as you exit the deal. And the profit from the sale ultimately lands $29,556 into Nunzio's bank account. When you put it all together, let's look at how the profits get calculated. So the profit from the cash flow over the course of the 36 months is about $29,556. Profit from the sale in 2023 is estimated at about $28,910. Put them all together, you make $58,466. And when you consider that he invested $72,000, that works out to about 27% return on investment per year, fully managed, turnkey, no tenants, no toilets, no headaches. Now you're probably thinking, okay, Rachel, how COVID-proof really is the rent-to-own strategy? Because, with real estate, there's been quite a bit of uncertainty. There's been a lot of questions, and I completely understand. And I feel those questions on a daily basis practically. So I decided to turn to my network, and I actually held a little poll. I put out a question on a recent webinar that I hosted, and the question was, which real estate investing strategies will continue to offer cash flow, profits, and peace of mind as we adapt to a new normal? And about 13% of the participants voted for student rentals. There's some optimists in the group. The BRRR strategy, so the BRRRR method, essentially you buy, you renovate, you rent, and you refinance, and then you rinse and repeat this process. This strategy has become extremely popular, and it's a great wealth building strategy because as you can imagine, there is no cash flow while you're renovating a property. So, and of course, there's a lot of contractors and a lot of power tools involved, but there are a lot of people who love it. And 40% of the people that I polled said that this strategy is going to survive and be somewhat COVID-proof. 13% of the participants said fix and flip is going to be COVID-proof. I'm not sure. Again, this involves power tools and contractors. So it's like, new construction. I kind of like new construction because there's really, for a long time, there's no tenants, there's no toilets, and certainly you don't have to worry about power tools and contractors. However, there is no cash flow. So for me, that strategy doesn't really work too well. And of course, then we come to my favorite, rent to own. 93% voted for rent to own being as the most COVID-proof strategy. Why? Because it offers consistent, continuous cash flow. The profits are pretty predictable, and it gives peace of mind. And I think ultimately, after we've been through this roller coaster with COVID, a lot of people are looking for some certainty and some predictability and some consistency. The other thing that I want to share with you is, we didn't really know how COVID would affect our rent-to-own investment properties. We didn't know whether our tenants would falter or whether they'd go on rent strikes, like I've seen some of my colleagues in the industry experience. But I'm proud to say that the homeowners that we're working with, they're not tenants. They have home owner mentality. We call them tenant buyers because they are emotionally and financially invested. They go house hunting to pick a property that makes sense for them, a property that they absolutely love. They put down anywhere from $12,000 to $30,000 as their initial down payment instead of first and last month's rent. And guess what? That down payment amount stays with the investor if those tenant buyers don't hold up their end of the bargain and buy the property or don't pay on time. So it's a big risk for these families. So they're emotionally connected, they're financially connected, and we put this to the test during COVID. And guess what? 99% of the families that are in our program currently, and we have about 75 active deals, 99% of them paid, and paid within 2 or 3 days of their rent and their monthly payment being due. So we experienced firsthand just how COVID-proof a rent-to-own strategy is. So now that we're kind of getting through COVID, let's talk about why now. Why is this strategy more relevant than before? Well, the simple truth is because of cash flow. Now, cash flow is heavily tied to the cost of borrowing. And guess what? The Bank of Canada's governor, Tiff Macklem, just recently announced in June 18th, 2020, he announced that we are going to be seeing record low interest rates, and they're here to stay for now. And for now is a little bit vague. However, the goal of why they're keeping interest rates low is because they want to maintain the current key interest rate to support sustained recovery. Sustained recovery to me suggests more long-term. It's going to take a little while for us as an economy to rebound from the effects of COVID. So the Bank of Canada's plan is to try to sustain that recovery, and they're going to do that by essentially keeping the interest rates as low as we're experiencing them today. And with the low cost of borrowing means that we have access to 80% loan to value mortgages at lower rates. We also have access to home equity lines of credit at lower rates. And all of that translates into higher cash flow. In fact, we're seeing cash flow go as high as $1,200 a month after you take into account paying the bank for a HELOC. So if you're using a HELOC as a source of down payment, you basically can still cash flow as much as $1,200 a month, which to me suggests that this window of opportunity is very ripe and something worth exploring. But I have to say, the rent to own strategy is not for everyone. I've talked to a lot of investors over many, many years, and it's not for everyone. So if you're not sure if it's for you, here are a couple of things to consider. Are you in real estate investing for the purposes of generating cash flow, or are you interested in generating future wealth? Ideally, a real estate investment portfolio should kind of have both. Something that gives you rapid cash flow and something that's kind of growing over time, paying for itself, and will be there as your nest egg in your elder years. Now, this of course varies depending on what age you are, at what point are you starting your real estate investing journey, and what is your end game ultimately. So sometimes people start with cash flow and build up the rapid cash and then use that to build their future wealth goals. Or sometimes people have been working on their future wealth goals and they just don't have the time to focus on building that portfolio, and they just need a quick injection of cash flow, so they switch gears for a little bit. So where are you in terms of your goals and your ultimate destination? And of course, buying power. Buying power is really important. Understanding your capacity to borrow and how much initial down payment funds you're working with is really key. For us, the average rent to own deal is anywhere from $75,000 down to $95,000 down. And we continue to use our home equity line of credit, especially now because interest rates are so favorable and we can still cash flow very, very abundantly. So if you have access to a HELOC, may determine whether or not this strategy is for you, because most rental properties don't have enough cash flow to sustain the interest payments if you're using a line of credit as your source of down payment. So that could be some food for thought. So if you don't have the savings as your down payment, then will it be able to come from a line of credit? And will your investment strategy cover the monthly costs of the interest on that line of credit? So some food for thought there. Now, also a day in a life. What kind of a life do you want to lead? What does your day look like? Do you have time to roll up your sleeves and get in there and manage deals and seek out opportunities and put everything together? Or, at this stage in your life, are you looking for something a little bit more passive so that you can focus your energy and attention on some other things that might matter? Where are you in your life, and how much time freedom do you have? And then ultimately, what are you looking for from the investing vehicle that you choose? We're all about families helping families. We're in this with a purpose to make a positive difference. And a lot of the investors that we work with share a similar values. So if that appeals to you, then it's something to check off as far as all the boxes go. Now, remember the St. Thomas deal? Nunzio was the gentleman that I had mentioned. I'm going to get to the heart of why Nunzio decided to invest in a rent-to-own strategy now, and of course, why St. Thomas. So I took a moment to get Nunzio's input, and I want to share that video here with you.
We're here in St. Thomas, beautiful St. Thomas, Ontario, and we're here for the home inspection of the property that we are interested in purchasing. We're really excited. It's a great property. It's a beautiful townhome, about 2.5 years old. So what appealed to us about this particular deal is it's within our budget. The deposit structure was very favorable. As well, the returns, even in this environment, with interest rates being favorable and the property being a starter home, the numbers really looked quite attractive for us. We would not be able to purchase a rental property in the Greater Toronto area and have these kind of returns if we were to do it on our own without Clover Properties. In regards to the COVID situation, yeah, it's a little bit scary and there's a little bit of the unknown. But the Clover property rent-to-own system really safeguards our future investment, and we feel confident with the work that Rachel is doing with us, especially how they are safeguarding and protecting the investors by really carefully screening the tenant buyers for us. From what I understand, the tenant buyers are screened using their own set of criteria, and right now they're only looking at essential workers. So the prospects of them losing their job are very low, and we feel confident about the quality of the tenants that Clover Property is providing on the deal for us. I would recommend Clover Properties for anyone interested in continuing to add to their real estate portfolio, or perhaps your first real estate investment. It's a great system. You're almost virtually guaranteed a good return on your investment, and I haven't found a better vehicle out there yet.
There you have it. Nunzio is actually part of our growing network of families who want to help other families get into homeownership through our rent-to-own program. These investors that you see here generate anywhere from $600 to $1,200 a month in cash flow in today's real estate market. So if you want to own an investment property that offers consistent cash flow and more time freedom, even during uncertain times like COVID, then I invite you to look at joining our family of investors, because we help you save time and reduce the risks by screening those tenants, by vetting those properties. Plus, we put all the contracts together for you and manage those tenants to keep them on track. And if you're still curious to find out a little bit more how the RTO strategy compares to other real estate investing strategies that you might be learning about, then I invite you to visit rtocashflow.ca. You can grab a free infographic that I put together. It compares and contrasts rent to own against 4 other popular investing strategies, including student rentals, buy, renovate, rent, refi, and repeat, the fix and flip strategy, and of course, new construction. And if you're feeling particularly inspired, you can also request a sample rent to own deal review with me. I'll be happy to walk you through a sample deal. Keep in mind, this infographic is available for a limited time, so jump onto rtocashflow.ca. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this presentation. I'm Rachel Oliver, and I wish you success on your real estate investing journey.